So, story time. Today I was on live and I was sharing my story and testimony about being a person living with HIV and hypothyroidism. It was hard being repetitive about my story on live because there was so much going on, but I decided that maybe it'll be a good idea to share my story here. And if we're going to tell a story, we're going to start from the beginning. So this might be a couple parts. So I got married at a really young age. I was 19 years old. Me and my ex-husband's relationship wasn't the best. Let's say that. So I met someone who lived not too far from where I lived, and they were just awesome. Like, he was awesome. He was amazing. He had a beautiful spirit. Like, everything about him I thought was great. And at the time, I wasn't getting, any attention or didn't have a healthy relationship at home being married at 19 years old. So I used to take walks with this new guy all the time with our dogs. And one day we stopped and he turned around in tears and he's like, "I want to tell you something." So I'm like, "Go ahead, tell me. There's nothing that you can't tell me." Obviously, at that time, I was already having feelings for him. We weren't doing anything inappropriate or being intimate, beyond being intimate mentally and emotionally. So he turns around and tells me, that he's living with HIV and that he was born with it. And I didn't mean to laugh, but I laughed because I cared about him so much that didn't bother me. It wasn't a big deal for me. I still wanted to be his friend. I still wanted to hang out with him. I still wanted to walk our dogs together.
The guy started crying, breaking down and telling her, what was wrong with him. And she continued to deal with him and being his friend and spending time with him or hanging out with him. Now, the average person, once you tell them something like that, they would have just kept their distance. They would have left you alone. But you see, she kept talking to him. So that means she must have really liked this guy.
And soon after that, we began to have really strong feelings for each other. So I decided to leave my ex-husband and move to Florida. All right, here's part 2 for everybody asking for me to share the second part of my story. So part 1 ended with me saying that we ended up moving to Florida together. So while we were in Florida, we were both, going to school, working, like just adjusting to a new life, adjusting to being with each other. He had his medication sent down from his doctor in New York so he could have his medication in Florida. And I thought that was great. Again, we were together and sleeping together unprotected. About a year of us living together, one day I had went over to where we kept like medications and stuff like that, and I noticed that there was a lot of dust on all of the medication bottles and all around them. And I was like taken aback because I'm like, well, if somebody is touching these medications every day, then there would be no dust rings or dust on the bottles. So when I saw that, I decided to open up a few of the bottles and see if they were even open or being used. And I found them all, for the most part, to be closed. Which means that the entire time we were out in Florida, he wasn't taking care of his health. So he did tell me that he was living with HIV. He did tell me that he was born with it. What he didn't tell me was that he was tired in his life and he didn't want to take medication anymore, or at least at that point in time. So I decided, because we were sleeping together unprotected, to make the executive decision to move back up to New York from Florida, to go back to his doctor and for us to both get tested. Him just to see where his count was in regards to his T cells, and me to see if I was living with HIV at all. So we went to his doctor. Well, let's go back. We moved from Florida back to New York in March. We got tested in March, and then in April April 20th, I found out that I was living with HIV. My initial reaction, a lot of people ask, like, what was your initial reaction? My initial reaction was like disappointment in myself. I kind of had this attitude like, well, what'd you expect? I walked from the doctor's office to my mom's house, which was probably a couple miles. And I kind of just sat with myself, trying to figure out how I really felt about the situation as a whole.